Hello. I think that's it. All right, let's start off this thing now. If everybody can hear me, how's the live stream? Is it fine? Any lags or anything like that? We're starting a new chapter today. Yes, 109. We were talking about the superstructure and how it impacts the base and how the base creates the superstructure and defines it, and the dialectical relations with that between the mode of production, the productive forces, and all that. So, no lag. Good. All right, let's go ahead and get started. Today we're starting on Chapter 2, Dialectics of the Base and Superstructure. 1. Definitions of the base and the superstructure. 1. Definition of the base. The concept of the base, or material base, or economic base refers to the totality of relationship of production that constitutes the economic structure of society. Karl Marx first accurately described the relationship between the superstructure and capital, as discussed more fully in the word economy refers to social activities which aim to solve the following questions: what to produce, how to produce for whom. The economic base therefore encompasses all the aspects of society which relate to humanity's efforts to solve these questions through material production processes, in accordance with the materialist dialectic principles of general relations, which holds that all things, phenomenons, and ideas are defined by internal and external relationships. We can define the material base by the following relationships. First bullet point: an internal relationship between productive forces and relations of production. 2. The external relations with the superstructure of society. The internal and the external relations described above drive change and development of human society in accordance with the universal law of principles of materialist dialectics. This is the basis of social formation theory. The base of the society in all its motions. It's made up of, the dominant relations of production, the remnant relations of production, and new relations of production. These descriptions of different relations of production which can exist in human society are all relative to the phenomenon relations of production. The predominant relations of production of the currently existing mode of production. Dominant relations of production include the relations of production which are currently the most commonly found in current forms of a given society. The class or classes which have control over the dominant relations of productions are the ruling classes. Remnant relations of production include relations of production which are held over from the previous form of society. New relations of production includes relation of productions which are newly emerging and giving enough development will give way to a new mode of production and a new stage of development for human society. Structures for relations of production under feudalism. Here we go. So this is feudalism. Slave society. That's where feudalism negated from. Slave society, relations to production. See? And you have the remnant. Here, relations of production. People are tied to the land. The land is also impacting the people. These are all things. All right? When it comes to feudalism, peasants are tied to land. Capitalist relations of production. New. It's transforming into the factory system, into the industrial centers, and industrializing. So one's tied to land, the other one's wage workers, and their social relations with each other and the means of production. Same thing with here. We're going to read more about it, see if I'm wrong or right. All right. Although the feudal relations of productions were dominant throughout the feudal era, remnant productions from the preceding mode of production continue to exist in remnant forms as capitalist relations of production were also beginning to develop. As an example, during the feudal era, the dominant relations of production were feudal relations of production, which revolved around ownership of land by noble lords, working on the land by peasants, developed of goods by craft guildsmen, trades of merchants, etc. During this era, remnant relations of production from the previous era, the ancient slave society, continued to exist. But they were not the predominant relations of production under feudalism. Also, during feudalism, new relations of production, specifically capitalist relations of production, developed a new classes the bourgeoisie and the proletariat began to emerge. An example of this development is how people began producing commodities for exchange at the market, rather than only producing directly for local use, consumption, and subsistence. Another example would be the development of early stock exchange, joint stock companies, such as the Dutch East India Company. Eventually, the new capitalist relations of production overtook feudal relations of production through social revolution. This led to the current era of capitalism. The buttery goodness of dictatorship. What? What do you mean? I think the Industrial Revolution did some good things. And also, the Industrial Revolution gave worse conditions for the worker, but gave the better conditions for the actually bourgeoisie forces. So, I don't know, maybe for them it was good. Let's see here. Under capitalism, the dominant relations of production are capitalist relations of production, which was bourgeoisie, or capitalist class owning the means of production as the ruling class, and the proletariat operating the means of production as wage laborers. Oh my God, I don't know what's your problem, right-winger, but like, you understand that you're not saying anything. Even today, there still exists remnant relations of production. For instance, there are still monarchs and nobles in nations like England, Saudi Arabia, and Thailand, which continue to possess great wealth and still wield varying degrees of social and political power. There are also new relations of production emerging in socialist nations like Vietnam and Cuba, which are attempting to build socialism via dictatorship of the proletariat, with the ambition to eventually do away with capitalism altogether. Given the development of human society is inevitable, each society will eventually manifest some certain new relations of production. These new relations of production form a seed which will eventually overtake the dominant relations of production and give way to a new form of society. We have a picture, everybody. Care Bears and cupcakes. Yeah, so what? So here we go. Let's see what we can do here. The initial form, first negation, contradicting subject. Second form, second negation, contradiction subjects, and then third form. Okay, down here it says third form resembles the initial form at a higher level of development, and that's why we have initial form. Okay, so we're gonna hopefully it explains this a little bit better. But it's talking about negation of negation a little bit. All right. In the dialectical development, characteristics are carried forward from one stage of development to the next, from both the initial and contradicting subjects. Materialist dialectics holds that characteristics are carried forward from previous stages of development. The essence, as a subject transforms from contradictions. These characteristics are carried forward from negating as well as negated subjects which contributed to the development of the previously existing subject. This is the materialist dialectics explanation for why the seeds of capitalism exist in previous stages of development in human society. Marx and Engels explains that this seed of capitalism was already presented in the feudal system in the manifesto of the Communist Party. The embryonic capitalist relations of production soon developed productive forces which were no longer compatible with the predominant feudal relations of production. This led to the feudal relations of production being burst asunder through social revolution, which resulted in a shift in humanity's mode of production from feudalism to capitalism. We see then the means of production and of exchange of those foundations the bourgeoisie built itself up were generated in feudal society at a certain stage in the development of the means of production of the exchange, the conditions under which feudal societies produce and exchange the feudal organization of culture and manufacturing industry. In one word, the feudal relations of property became no longer compatible with the already developed productive forces. They became so many fetters. They had to be burst asunder. They were burst asundered. Unto their place steeped free competition, accompanied by a social and political constitution adopted in it, and the economic and political sway of the bourgeoisie class. The manifesto also explains that the capitalist mode of production contains a seed of a proletarian revolution, which will eventually lead to the downfall of capitalism and the end of class society altogether. That's the goal in Marxism, ending of class societies. The essential conditions of the existence and for the sway of the bourgeoisie class in the formation of augmentation of the capital. The conditions for capital is wage labor. Wage labor rests exclusively on competition between the laborers. The advance of the industry, whose involuntary promoter is the bourgeoisie, replaces the isolation of the laborers due to competition by the revolutionary combination due to association. The development of modern industry, therefore, cuts from under its feet the very foundation of which the bourgeoisie produces the appropriate products. What the bourgeoisie therefore produces above all are its own gravediggers. Its fall and the victory of the proletariat are equally inevitable. In socialism, utopian and scientific, Friedrich Engels explains how the productive forces were already becoming unsuitable to capitalist relations of production, even in his day of age, and that this constitutes the objective phenomenon which will eventually lead to social revolution and the end of capitalism. The present situation of society, this is now pretty generally conceded, is the creation of the ruling class of today, of the bourgeoisie. The mode of production particular to the bourgeoisie, not known since Marx as the capitalist mode of production, was incompatible with the feudal system, with the privilege it confers upon individuals' entire social ranks, local cooperations, as well as with the hereditary ties of subordination which constitutes the framework of its social organization. The bourgeoisie broke up the feudal system, built upon its ruins the capitalist order of society, the kingdom of free competition, of personal liberty, of the equality before the law, of all commodity owners, of all the rest of the capitalist blessings. Thenceforth, the capitalist mode of production could develop in freedom, since steam machinery and the making of machines by machinery transformed the old manufacturer into modern industry. The productive forces involved under the guidance of the bourgeoisie developed with a rapidity and in the degree unheard of before. Just as the older manufacturer in in its time, the handicraft becomes more developed under its influence, had come into collision with the feudal trammels of the guilds. So now modern industry in its complete development comes into collision with the bonds within which the capitalist mode of production holds in it confined it. The new productive forces have already outgrown the capitalist mode and using them. And this conflicts between productive forces and the mode of production is not a conflict engendering in the mind of man, like that between original sin and divine justice. It exists, in fact, objectively, outside us, independently of the will and actions even of the men that have brought it on. Modern socialism is nothing but a reflex in thought of this conflict in fact. It deals reflection, its ideal reflection in the minds, first of the class directly suffering under it, the working class. Oh, someone got blocked. Keep talking. Yeah, I'll keep talking. No worries. Hey, pizza's live, I guess. In Anti-During, Engels explains that the development of capitalist productive forces builds up the proletariat in size and strength, leading to increasing instability between productive forces and capitalist relations of production. This is the seed of communism, already planted within the capitalist mode of production. So it's almost like it's a necessity, you know? Yeah, no worries. I'm good. Thank you. In the introduction and increase of machinery, means of displacement of millions of manual by a few machine workers, improvement in machinery means the displacement of more and more of the machine workers themselves. It means that the last instance, the production of a number of available wage workers in excess of the average needs of capital. The formation of the complete industrial reserve army, as I call it in 1845, available at the times when industry is working at high pressure, to be cast out upon the street when the inevitable crash comes, a constant dead weight upon the limbs of the working class in its struggle for existence with capital, the regulator for the keeping of wages down to the low level that suits the interests of capital. Thus it comes about, to quote Marx, that machinery becomes the most powerful weapon in the war of capital against the working class, that the instruments of labor constantly tear the means of subsistence out of the hands of the laborer, that the very product of the worker is turned into the instrument for his subjugation. Thus, it comes about that the economizing of the instruments of labor becomes, at the same time from the outset, the most reckless waste of labor power, the robbery based upon the normal conditions under which labor functions. That machinery, the most powerful instrument for shortening labor time, becomes the most infailing means for placing every moment of the laborer's time and that of his family at the disposal of the capitalist for the purpose of expanding the value of his capital. Thus, it comes about that the overworked of some becomes a preliminary condition for the idleness of others, and that modern industry which hunts, after new consumers over the whole world, forces the consumption of the masses at home down to the starvation minimum, and in doing this destroys its own home market. The law that always equilibrates the relative surplus population, or industrial reserve armies. The industrial reserve armies are the unemployed, by the way, everybody, to the extent of energy and accumulation. This law rivets the laborers to capital more firmly than the wedges of Vulcan did Prometheus to the rock. It establishes an accumulation of misery corresponded with accumulation of capital. Accumulation of wealth at one pole is therefore at the same time accumulation of misery, agony and toil, slavery, ignorance, brutality, mental degradation at the opposite pole, i.e. on the side of the class that produces its own products in the form of capital. Whilst the capitalist mode of production more and more completely transforms the great majority of the population into proletariats, it creates the power which under penalty of its own destruction is forced to accomplish this revolution. Such inherent and destabilizing contradictions within the capitalist mode of production, i.e. the seed of communism, which is contained within capitalism, are the subject of such great works as Capital by Karl Marx and Imperialism, the highest stage of capitalism by Lenin, and are a key subject of the study of political economy. The end of the capitalist mode of production will end class society entirely, allowing humanity to enter a new era of stateless, classless society, as Marx and Engels explains in the manifesto. See? You're supposed to believe in a classless state. Hello, TJ. Classless, stateless, moneyless society. See what I mean? Jesus Christ. When in the course of development, class distinctions have disappeared and all production has been concentrated in the hands of the vast associations of the whole nation, the public power will lose its political character. Political power, properly so called, is merely the organized power of one class for oppressing another, hence the state. If the proletariat during its contest with the bourgeoisie is compelled by the force of circumstances to organize itself as a class, if by means of a revolution it makes itself the ruling class, and as such sweep away by force the old conditions of production, then it will, along with these conditions, have swept away the conditions for the existence of class antagonism and the classes in generally, and will thereby have abolished its own supremacy as a class in the place of the old bourgeois society with its classes and class antagonism. We shall have an association in which the free development of each is the condition for free development of all. See? Oh my gosh, already? Again? What the fuck? You allow content like mine. Well, that sucks that Rojava fell, I guess. I don't know much about Rojava, though. The dominant relations of production are those which have risen above all the relations of production. The dominant relations of production set the course of direction for the development of society and define the economic regime of the given society. The fact that all these types of relations of production exist within the base of any given society reflects the nature of the productive forces as processing the characteristics of continuous motion and inheritance of development. We must avoid thinking of development of human society in metaphysical terms, which understand the ways in which things, phenomena, and ideas change over time. One such metaphysical conception is that the terminal negation. Terminal negation is an incorrect view of development which holds that when something is negated, it ceases to exist entirely. This misconception materialist dialectics holds that negation is a process in which different subjects contradictions each other through internal and external relationships, which with one subject eventually taking over the other. Then, when this occurs, the negated subject inherits characteristics from that which is negated. This process of development is continuous, meaning that it is indefinite and is constantly driven by the internal motions of contradictions, negation. So we're going to look at this. Okay? Now, negation is a spiral, not a straight line. Okay, here we go. We got negation, right? Things, phenomena, and ideas arise, exist, develop, perish, and are replaced. Here we go. A, stage of development. B, qualitative shift. C, dialectical negation. Development continues indefinitely. Down here it says replacement negation. See, that A is being replaced by B, and B is being replaced by C. Here we go. Now let's go down here. The viewpoint of A, terminal negation, end of development of A, which is not true, because essence of A will remain in the characteristics of B. That's why we have feudal relations still here under capitalism. It's just not a huge dominant part of the essence of capitalism. Do you feel upset due to the failure of Java? I heard it's a bad upset. Historical materialism asserts that the development of human society occurs through processes of contradiction and negation, which follows the subject laws of materialist dialectics. This means that the development of human society must adhere to the principles of continuous motion and inheritance. Continuous motion of development in the development of human society. Continuous motion refers to the fact that all things, phenomena, and ideas are constantly changing, and that this change is brought about by internal and external relationships. Negation processes of human society must adhere to the principle of development, which states that development is the process that comes from within a thing, from within the thing in itself. The process of solving the contradiction within things and phenomena. Therefore, development is inevitable, objective, and occurs without dependency on human will. This means that development and negation of human society stems from internal relations within society, which lead to internal contradictions. Developed through negation within class society is inevitable and objective, and occurs without dependency on human will. In other words, humans do not consciously determine these negations, though the conscious activity of human beings can impact these negation processes in accordance with the dialectical materialist conception of the relationship between material and human consciousness. Human society is always continuously changing through development in quantity, which in turn leads to quality shifts. For example, productive forces developing through increases of quantity of productive output, quantity of efficiency, etc. And these changes in quantity eventually lead to a change in quality, i.e. negation of one production technology by another, negation of one preferred input material by another, etc. There are countless examples of such quantity to quality negation occurrence through human history. Computers replacing typewriters, cars negating horses, automated factories replace handicrafts, and so on. Whenever new technology emerges within the productive forces, they develop gradually, at first only affecting productive forces in terms of quantity until a quality shift occurs. Here we go. Got some more pictures. Metaphysics, misinterpretation of development of human society. First picture. Here we go. Feudal society, development. And then they got capitalist society, development. Development of feudalism abruptly ends. Feudal society disappears when capitalism begins. Remember, that's a metaphysical conception. Historical materialist perception. Feudalist society. You can see the impacts. You can see the social relations, the relations to the land, how the land impacts their productive forces and the means of production. And then look, see how the line goes up, 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 up? Development. Here, the line ended. Here, it's a perpetual motion. Development. Again, class capitalist societies. These arrows indicate the relationship between each other, the mode of production, and the impact of the productive forces on the mode of production. Okay. I don't think Rajaba should have went down, honestly. but I don't know much about Rojava, so can't really. Hold on a second, I gotta help a kitty cat out. Go on. Oh, fuck off, bitch. The cat hissed at me for helping them. That's funny. Historical materialism holds that society develops in accordance with the materialist dialectics. Quality shifts is one aspect of human society, will lead to quality shifts in other aspects in accordance with the relationship between matter and consciousness. This means that quality shifts in productive forces leads to quality shifts in relations of production, and quality shifts in relations to production lead to quality shifts in society's superstructure. This is the basis of the law of suitability, which is explained. So law of suitability means that, like, the productive forces are really are satisfied with the mode of production, but now we have the law of suitability, so now workers are unsuitable, or not, the mode of production is not suitable to them, so there needs to be a change. Okay. Inheritance and development of human society. As stated previously, when one subject negates another, it inherits characteristics and properties from that which it negates. Inheritance of the development of human society. Here we go. Another picture, everybody. I hope people like the pictures. Feudal society contains a seed of capitalism. You see the little seed? The little thing right there? That's the seed of capitalism. And again, it's the same picture. Productive forces impacting each other and impacting the mode of production and all that thing. The same stuff, right? Capitalism, right? Seed of capitalism. Characteristics are carried forward. Here's the remnants. See, contains the remnants of feudalism. See, that's the diagram. The inheritance principle means that characteristics of one stage of development are carried forward to the next stage. This also means that the present human society contains the seed of the society to come. Negation processes of human society must adhere to this principle of inheritance, meaning that when a new mode of production negates the older, lower mode of production, it carries characteristics forward from the preceding mode of production. For example, capitalism still processes characteristics which are inherited from feudalism, such as remnant relations of production, i.e. nobles and monarchs continue to exist even under capitalism. The other characteristics of feudal society, which continues to exist both in the base of the superstructure, both in the base and the superstructure of capitalism. Indeed, modern capitalist societies even contain inherited characteristics of ancient society, which long predate our current mode of production. In conclusion, the relations of production constitutes a system within society which plays a dual role. On the one hand, the relations of production serve as a social economic form of the production process. In this sense, the relations of production govern and maintenance, promotions, and development of the productive forces, which serve as a material content of the production process. This constitutes a dialectical relationship which defines the material production process. On the other hand, the relations of production govern the formation of the economic structure of society through mutual development with the socio-political relations of society. This constitutes a dialectical relationship which defines the superstructure of society. Here we go, another picture. So, right here, human society. Down here, material production process. Right here, productive forces. Social form, relations of production, superstructure, economic structure, impacts the base. This impacts everything. So, let's go further on. Hope everybody's enjoying the pictures at least. Relations of production define both productive forces as the social form of material production process and the superstructure as the economic structure of human society. The relations of production are critically important in defining human society. They serve to define both the superstructure and the economic base of human society by providing a relatively stable form to both aspects of human society. Within the economic base, the relations of production serve as a social form of the material production process. In other words, the relations of production constitutes a stable set of human relationships which shape and govern the mode of production in a human society. At the same time, the relations of production provide a stable economic socio-political form to the superstructure of society. The relations of production define important aspects of human society, such as who has control of the means of production, and in class society, who controls the state. All human institutions and social consciousness forms are determined by economic relations of production. The role of the state is discussed more in annotation 100. Institutions and social consciousness forms are discussed more. Okay, chapter 2. All right. Defining the definition of superstructure. Marx defines the relations of production as the economic base of socio-political relations of society, writing. The totality of these relations of production constitutes an economic structure of society, the real foundation on which arises a legal and political superstructure, and thus, according to Marx's point, into which corresponds definite forms of social consciousness. Thus, according to Marx's point of view, the concept of superstructure refers to the entire structural system social consciousness forms along with corresponding socio-political institutions which are formed on the economic base. The superstructure of a given society is a complex structure of relationships that can be analyzed from different perspectives, thereby revealing these relationships as an interwoven and constantly developed through mutual impact. From the most general perspectives, superstructures can be consisting of two parts. One, a system of social consciousness forms including political forms, legal forms, religious forms, etc. Two, a corresponding system of socio-political institutions including states, political parties, religious institutions. And we got another picture, everybody. We're full of pictures today, everybody. Hey, welcome back, Rachel. So here you got institutions, superstructure, social consciousness forms. You can see these arrows mean that they impact each other, right? Down here, material base. And of course, they impact each other. This creates this. This creates that. These impact each other. Same thing with this. This impacts that. And that creates this, the superstructure. Society's superstructure is defined both by internal relationships between institutions and social consciousness forms, and by its external relationships within society, materials base. The superstructure is defined primarily by its external relationships with the material base and its internal relationships between social consciousness forms and corresponding socio-political institutions. The base determines the superstructure, though the superstructure can impact back upon the material base in important ways. This is the law of the economic base, determining the superstructure of society, which is explained on page 90. Within the superstructure, the state is the most significant institution because it has the greatest ability to impact the base, social consciousness forms. Social consciousness is human consciousness, which is generally shared throughout society. It can be thought as a collective consciousness. However, it must be understood that there is nothing metaphysical or supernatural about social consciousness. Social consciousness is simply the body of human consciousness which exists among many human beings in certain times and places. Here we go. More pictures. I'm going to say hi to Rachel again because I like Rachel. Rachel's cool. All right, here we go. More pictures. Okay, so right here you have social consciousness and social being. Here we go. Aesthetic consciousness, moral consciousness, scientific consciousness, political consciousness. Looks like they impact. Maybe they have a relations in there. Okay, and that develops the social being. That's why we are a capitalist mindset and liberal and neoliberalist mindsets. That's why it's a neoliberal society. Social consciousness is defined by internal relationships of social consciousness, forms, and an external relationship with social being. Social consciousness is defined primarily by these relationships, internal relationship, and all other aspects of social consciousness. The external relationship between social consciousness and social being, which is the material existence of human society. Social being is discussed more. Bearing in mind the materialist dialectic category pair of content and form, we can understand that the social consciousness form is simply a set of stable relationships which exist within social consciousness. Stability here simply means that the form manifests over time in the manner which is relatively consistent and identifiable. That said, it must also be noted that social consciousness forms, despite this relative stability, never stops changing and developing in accordance with the principles of development. Another picture, everybody. Am I still restricted? Did I win that appeal? No, of course not. Fuckers. Appeal not approved. Goddamn, they let other people not do that, but not me. I'm not allowed to do that. Not allowed to do that, but other people are. All right, here's a picture, everybody. I mean, how many people do you see that don't show their faces? Come on now. Bullshit. All right, here we go. Corresponding social institutions. All other social consciousness forms. You can see within that's the internal contradictions, the internal things, right? This is external, the little arrows. So this is internal. I think this is external, right? Social consciousness form. Nothing there, okay? And then social being. Corresponding of social institutions that they just impact each other. All right, let's see if I got that right. Every form of social consciousness is defined in part by external relationships with corresponding institutions, with social being, and with all other forms of social consciousness. The content of social consciousness form includes all the various ideas, attitudes, beliefs, and other manifestations of human consciousness, which come together as a stable form of social consciousness. Whenever such ideas are packaged together and held collectively by a group of human beings, they become a social consciousness form. Every social consciousness form has a corresponding socio-political institution. Such an institution exists to develop and advance its corresponding social consciousness. Formed through dialectical development, institutions will be discussed more later in the annotation. Okay. A social consciousness form can thus be defined by internal and external relationships. Internal relationships between the thoughts, ideas, beliefs, and other manifestations of consciousness which compose of social consciousness forms. External relationships with its corresponding institutions with other social consciousness forms, as well as the material base of society. The external relationship which exists between social consciousness forms and socio political institutions define, in turn, the superstructure of society. The dialectical relationship between the social consciousness form and its corresponding institutions is itself one of the content and form. In this sense, the social consciousness form serves as a content of the institution, serves as a social form. Thus, the social consciousness form will determine the existence of its corresponding institutions, while the institutions can impact back on the social consciousness form. Social consciousness form manifests in various forms. According to the Vietnamese textbook, Philosophy of Marxist-Leninism, these forms include political consciousness, and they're going to define it. A form of consciousness that only exists in class societies which have states. Political consciousness reflects economic and social relationships between classes, peoples, and nations, as well as the attitudes of different classes towards the state power. Legal consciousness, the entire system. Okay, no worries. The entire system of ideas and opinions which a class holds about the nature and role of law, about the rights and obligations of the state, social organization and citizens, and about the legality and the illegality of human behavior in society, along with human awareness and emotions as they pertain to the enforcement of state laws. Moral consciousness, the totality of concepts, knowledge, and psychological, emotional condition of human communities pertaining to values of good, evil, conscience, responsibility, happiness, justice, etc., as well as rules of evaluating, regulating behaviors between individuals and societies, and between individuals within society. Aesthetic consciousness related to the need to enjoy and create beauty. Among the form of activities to enjoy and create beauty, art is a highest form of expression of aesthetic consciousness. Religious consciousness, the totality of symbols, emotion, moods, and habits of the masses regarding religious belief. Religious ideology is a system of doctrine created to spread society by clergies and theologians. In addition to these general forms of social consciousness, there are two special forms of social consciousness which are particularly relevant to the pursuit of scientific socialism. Scientific knowledge penetrates other forms of social consciousness, serving as the basis of scientific fields which correspond to each form of consciousness. For example, the scientific form of political consciousness is political science. The scientific form of moral consciousness is ethics. The scientific form of artistic consciousness is artistic science. The scientific form of religious consciousness is religious studies, and so on. Scientific consciousness is an important component of the cognitive theory of dialectical materialism. Stay home and love our country. Okay. All right, here we go. Socio-political institutions. A socio-political institution is an organization which human beings have created to institute, codify, expand, and develop a corresponding social consciousness form. Whenever human beings develop a social consciousness form, they come together to promote, defend, and advance it. It becomes a basis of socio-political institutions. Such institutions serve social and political functions. Social, because they exist by definition as organized systems which have been created and developed by a group of human beings to defend, promote, advance, and otherwise develop a corresponding form of social consciousness. Social institutions, therefore, have a explicitly social function within the superstructure of human society. Now, they're not going over the particularities of specific superstructures like the United States. They're just going over the broad basis of these things, right? So they're not factoring in the conditions of white supremacy in the United States. They're just doing it just to tell you what it is, and that's it. Without any of those things. So we all know about the conditions of the superstructure and the material base that is principally white supremacist. Even like they say that the superstructure and the institutions are white supremacist institutions, and we say here that the superstructure impacts the material base and so forth, that we know that within the material base, white supremacy is within that. So, examples of socio-political institutions include state. Socio-political institutions, which are the totality of forms of governance over society by ruling classes. State can take various forms, and many be governed in a wide variety of manners. States exist to enforce dictatorships of the ruling class over all other classes. Political parties, socio-political institutions which exist to develop, dismantle, disseminate, and advance political ideologies by codifying political doctrine and programs, disseminating propaganda, recruiting memberships from society at large, training and advancing leaders, running political candidates in elections, and so on. In class society, political parties are controlled by a specific class. For example, in a capitalist society, most political parties serve the interests of the capitalist class, though opposition parties may exist to represent the interests of the remnant of oppressed class interests. For example, in some nations, there are royalist parties, which represent the interest of the remnant classes, such as monarchs and feudal lords. In other nations, there are communist parties, which represent the working class and seek to put workers in command of society. Religious institutions, socio-political institutions, which exist for humans to practice and develop religious belief systems. Churches, mosques, and synagogues are all examples of religious institutions. In addition to the socio-political institution types listed above, there are countless other, including universities, labor unions, industrial associations, and on and on. Institutions of social consciousness forms are determined by the economic base and social being of human society, but they play a very important effect on the development of human society. Nonetheless, they are capable of impacting back upon the material world, as Engels wrote in the letter to Comrade Schmidt in 1890. While the material mode of existence is the primary agent, prime cause, this does not preclude the ideological spheres from reacting upon in their turn, though with a secondary effect. In a class society, and especially in modern society, the two most important social consciousness forms in the superstructure of society are political consciousness and legal consciousness forms. And the two most important institutions in the superstructure of society are the political parties, the state. The state is a special apparatus that organizes and exercises power within a class society. On the surface, the state usually presents itself as an organization system that coordinates and shares power of the people in order to manage and control all activities of society and to perform political and social functions along the domestic and foreign affairs functions. In reality, however, every state is a tool of wield power in order to exercise the dictatorship of the ruling class, which is defined as the class that holds the main means of production of society. Political and legal consciousness forms are considered the most important social consciousness forms within the superstructure of society because they have the most potential to impact back upon the material base of society. This is because they relate directly to the class structure which exists within a given society mode of production. The same can be said for political parties and for the states, which are socio-political institutions which reflect and relate the most directly to a society's class structure and material base. We have more pictures. We have more pictures. We have social consciousness forms, socio-political institutions, state, political parties, legal consciousness forms. They impact each other, have a relationship with each other. Political conscious forms, same thing. Same thing. That's all they're showing. Most important social consciousness form and institutions are legal consciousness and the corresponding state, as well as political consciousness and the corresponding political parties. A political party corresponds to a political consciousness form which represents a specific class within society. Political parties are the most effective vehicles for a class to impact back upon the material base by securing benefits from the means of production for that class, building power for that class, and protecting the interests of that class. A state is a special socio-political institution which a class uses to govern and control a society. Only the ruling class can command a state, and this rulership is known as class dictatorship. Under capitalism, the state is controlled by the capitalist class. This means that the powerful but tiny minority of society has a dictatorship over the working class, which constitutes the great majority of society. Here we go. Another picture, everybody. Everybody liking the pictures? Liking the pictures? So here, working class. We have procedures of social revolution. Here we have the working class. And what's that say? Establishes workers' parties. Establishes worker state. Controlled means of material bases. That's the first phase to smash and to create. The working class under capitalism has a mission to build a workers' party and establish a workers' state in order to seize control of the material base of society. Now, this is different depending on the position you hold as a Marxist or as a communist. So, okay? There's many different things. Even an anarchist. Anarchists don't like the state, but they still think of a classless, stateless, moneyless society. Same thing as a Marxist. It's just different ways of going about it to achieve the mission. The mission of the working class, according to the principles of scientific socialism, is to establish a dictatorship over the capitalist class. This simply means that the vast majority of society, i.e. the workers, controls society instead of a tiny minority of capitalists. This can only be achieved by seizing control of the means of production, and I would say by smashing and destroying the material base of society. This would give the workers the ability to develop state power over society, which will eventually give the working class the opportunity to finally dismantle class society once and for all. So again, the job of the dictatorship of the proletariat is to abolish itself as a class and to end class society. It is important to note that the state is the most important socio-political institution because it has the most impact on the economic base. This characteristic of the state is discussed in annotation. Class struggle is discussed more. Okay, this is telling me different annotations. Okay, so annotation 155. So we're going to get there. Section 2. Where am I at? Good to go. Dialectical relationships between the base and the superstructure. Base and superstructure are the two basic aspects of society. The base is the economic aspect. The superstructure is the socio-political aspect. Together, the base and superstructure exist in a dialectical, unified relationship with each other, mutually impacting one another. In this dialectical relationship, the base plays a determining role for the superstructure. At the same time, the superstructure constantly impacts back on the base. 1. The base determines the superstructure. The role which the base plays in determining the superstructure is revealed in many ways. First, every economic base forms a suitable superstructure. to maintain and protect the base. Changes in the base create the objective needs to have corresponding changes in the superstructure. Contradictions in the base are reflected in the contradictions within the superstructure. Struggle between different socio-political ideologies, as well as conflicts between different social-political interests, all have root cause in class struggle to benefit from the economic base of society. The class that owns the means of production of society is also the class that holds state power in the superstructure of society, while other classes are in the subordinate position to the state power. State policy and laws, in the end, only reflect the economic domination of the class which owns the means of production of the society and serves the needs of that ruling class. In short, in any given society, the base determines the superstructure, while the superstructure reflects the base and impacts back upon the base. Another picture. Here we go. Simple picture. Superstructure, material base. Reflects and protects. So the superstructure reflects and protects. So if the base is capitalism, then the capitalist people will utilize the state to protect the material base. And for suitability with the material base of human society. This need gives rise to the law of economic base determining the superstructure. The base and superstructure dialectically define and develop each other. The material base is reflected in the superstructure in countless ways. At the same time, the superstructure develops so as to reflect, protect, and preserve relations of production in order to ensure a stable material production process. Following a fuller explanation of the various ways in which the determining roles of material base is reflected in the superstructure of society. 1. Every economic base forms a suitable superstructure to maintain and protect the base. Throughout the history of class society, the superstructure of society has served to further the interests of the ruling class through the development of social consciousness forms. The socio-political institutions which predominantly reflect the values and interests of the ruling class. As a result, prevailing philosophies and social institutions have always reflected the values and interests of the ruling class in every era of class society. Examples of social consciousness forms in class society. Most major prevailing philosophies have defined and served the interests of the ruling class of society, which produces them. For example, the philosophy of Aristotle defended the institutions of slavery in ancient Greece and extolled the virtues of land-owning ruling class. Chivalry was a medieval philosophical system which upheld the feudal system, which included knighthood and aristocratic notions of noble birth. In today's society, most prevailing philosophy in the world upholds and defends the capitalist mode of production. Legal system. Having always historically served the interests of the ruling class under feudalism, legal systems uphold the hereditary system and monarchy and nobility and prevent peasants from participating in governing the state. Today, under capitalism, the legal system of most nations heavily favor capitalist class while suppressing workers in various ways. Examples of socio-political institutions in class society. During the feudal era, religious institutions primarily served the interests and defended the position of feudal lords and monarchs. They were also determined by the economic base of feudal society. The church in medieval Europe, for example, controlled feudal land holdings. In a similar fashion, the noble lords was financed through tithes and donations secured from the wealthy ruling class. Today, most religious institutions defend and reinforce the capitalist mode of production and are determined by the economic base of capitalism. That is to say, they are typically recognized by the capitalist control state and seldom challenge the authority of the ruling class of the ruling capitalist class, but rather normalized capitalist relations of production with the practitioners of religious faith. States have always predominantly been ruled and governed by a ruling class in every era of history. Under feudalism, the state was controlled directly by monarchs and feudal lords. Under capitalism, the ruling class controlled the state in most nations through financial contributions to political candidates and parties, through lobbying, through bribery and corruption, through corporate influences on governments, and through various other means. 2. Changes in the base create the objective needs to have corresponding changes in the superstructure. Karl Marx explains this concept in the preface of a contribution of the critique of the political economy. The changes in the economic foundation led sooner or later to the transformation of the whole immense superstructure. This was Marx's formulation of the law of the economic base determining the superstructure of society. This law is further defined in Vietnamese textbook, Philosophy of Marxist-Leninism. The base and the superstructure are two sides of society. They have a dialectical unity with each other in which the base plays a decisive role. Each base will form a corresponding superstructure. The characteristics of the superstructure are defined by the characteristics of its base. In class society, whichever class rules the economy also has the ruling position of politics and spiritual and mental life of society. Every condition in the economy, in the end, always decides the contradictions in the ideological politics. All the struggles between different ideologies in politics are manifestations of struggles which exist in the economy, relations of production. All the factors of the superstructure, such as the state, the law, philosophy, religion, and so on, directly and indirectly depend on the base. This process of change in the base leading to changes in the superstructure does not only occur when the socioeconomic form changes to a new socioeconomic form, i.e. from feudalism to capitalism, but also occurs within socioeconomic forms, even though the changes of the superstructure go hand in hand with the productive forces. The productive forces do not directly change the superstructure. The development of the productive forces change the relationship of production, which means it directly changes the base, and through the development, the superstructure changes. That's why I believe as a Maoist of cultural revolution. The changes in the base lead to the changes in the superstructure happen in a very complicated manner. In this process, there are some factors within superstructure that change very fast in response to the change in the base, such as change in politics and law. There are also factors that change very slowly, such as religion, art, aesthetics, and so on. There are also factors that are inherited from previous socioeconomic forms. What's this dude saying? You know Luna? I am a mod for her YouTube. Nice! I like her. She's got more. I'm glad she's done doing this book. You know? Yep, we like her. 3. Contradictions in the base are reflected in the contradictions within the superstructure. Reflection is the recreation of the features of one subject into the different subjects which occurs when they mutually impact each other through interactions. Reflection occurs on all dialectical relationships between subjects. Because the base and the superstructure have a dialectical relationship with one another, and because the base, as the material component of society, determines the superstructure, reflects the reflections of the base in the superstructure are profound and determines the essence. Of the superstructure. The essence of the superstructure. It should be noted that the superstructure is able to impact back upon the base of society, but it can never determine the base because of the dialectical materialist conception of the relationship between matter and consciousness. And so, the reflection of the superstructure found in the base will always be less profound than the reflection of the base found in the superstructure. In feudal society, for example, such reflections of the contradictions of the base can be found in prevailing and predominant philosophies of that era. Social consciousness formed such a chivalry and fealty in medieval Europe, reflected the relations of production of that era, and also justify those relations of production, giving the ruling class of monarchs and nobles the most power and prestige in that society. I've read some, but what basic stuffs have you read? Because I don't want to have to redo it. Similarly, the prevailing philosophies within Kabbalist superstructures reflect the Kabbalist mode of production, the material base, which determines the superstructure. For example, philosophy and meritocracy, competition, and individualism justify the exploitation of workers by capitalists and otherwise legitimize capitalist relations of production. Have you read? I'm assuming you probably read. What's your position? What position do you take? Because these two books are a great place to start too. Reflection of the super. Wait, am I done now? Yeah, I did that. Reflection of the superstructure is based much more subtle, but they do exist. For example, bourgeoisie democracy has granted some concessions to workers, even in highly developed bourgeoisie states such as the United States, by developing institutions and social consciousness forms with working class character. Workers have gained workplace safety regulations, child labor laws, etc. Such forms can improve conditions for workers, but they will never be able to fundamentally alter relations of production. Similarly, no amount of alteration and change within the bourgeois-controlled state. Hold on. Look up, go to State and Revolution by Vladimir Lenin. Go there, and then next, after that, there's also another book called Blood in My Eye by George L. Jackson. That is more prevalent to the conditions of the United States if you're there. I would read those two books. That's usually my go-to for scenarios to start with. And I don't want to give you too much. There's a lot more, tons more. Go on Marxist.org, but Lenin can help you too in a little ways, and maybe I don't know, yeah. All right. Similarly, amount of the alterations and change within the bourgeoisie-controlled state, nor any other socio-political institutions will result in the arrangement of the relations of production and other essential aspects of the economic base. The only way to fundamentally alter the material base is through social revolution, which places the working class in command of the means of production and productive forces of human society. That said, efforts towards changing the superstructure of society can strengthen the positions of the revolutionary class and hasten the victory of social revolution over ruling class. This is important to the mission of scientific socialism. Thank you for putting that in. What was the best communist country? I don't know. They all had their contradictions, their good things and their bad things. I don't know. Maybe Russia during Lenin's time? The best? I don't know. 4. Struggling between different socio-political ideologies, as well as conflicts between different socio-political interests, all have root causes in class struggle to benefit from the economic base of society. Throughout the history of class society, political struggles have stemmed from one prevailing question: who might benefit from the economic base of society? During the feudal era, there were political struggles between different classes, all competing for material benefits from the economic base. Peasants sought to keep more of the crops they grew, and to toil under better conditions. Merchants struggled against taxation and hoped to build their wealth. Noble lords struggled against the monarch to hold more power in their own hands, to expand their lands, and to live more comfortable lives. Monarchs fought to maintain rulership over society, to expand the territories of their kingdom. Today, under capitalism, class struggle has been reduced primarily to the struggle between the proletariat and the bourgeoisie. Working struggle for higher wages, lower taxation, and better paychecks, better working conditions, increased power in society. Capitalist struggle to keep workers suppressed, to drive down wages, to increase their share of profits while lowering taxes on their capital gains and assets. The ruling class uses all means available to protect their own class in interest, including the use of social consciousness forms and socio-political institutions to develop false consciousness within the working class. False consciousness is any human consciousness which does not reflect material reality, the objective conditions, in the context of class struggle. The capitalist class seeks to develop false consciousness in the workers by eliminating the negating class consciousness, so that workers will side with the ruling class agenda under their own interests. For this reason, building class consciousness among the workers is an important prerequisite of social revolution. Oh, we got a picture. Okay, we're doing good. After this picture, I'll see where we're going. The class that holds the ownership of the means of production of society is also the class that holds state power in the superstructure of society, while other classes are the subordinate position to the state power. Here we go. I don't know where to start with this. Economic base, working class. Bourgeoisie state, superstructure. Capitalist class controls, bourgeoisie state impacts material base. And then the bourgeoisie, what does it say? Controls working class. There you go. Hope that makes sense. The state is a virtual importance in class society because it allows the ruling class to maintain control over the means of production and workers through coercive violence. You want to screenshot it real quick? Hold on a second. Let's see if I can get it for you. You might have to hold on a second. Let me do this. All right. You might have to, down here, don't screenshot it yet. Down here, label it the working class. Let me know when you screenshotted it. How am I going to know if they screenshot it? I'll give you 3 seconds. 5 seconds. 5. There you go. 4, 3, 2, 1. All right. Sweet. Thank you. Can you please get rid of the comments real quick again? Joe, can you get rid of the comments real quick? Thank you. Now you can put them back on. Thank you, Joe. The state is virtual importance in class society because it allows the ruling class to maintain and control the means of production and the workers through coercive violence. Already read that. In any given class society, the ruling class is the class which owns the means of production. The ruling class of any given society, any given class society, will always gain control of state power. This manifestation of dialectical materialism conception of a relationship between matter and consciousness, the means of production and economic base, as a material component of society determines who has control over the state, which, as a socio-political institution, is manifestation of human social consciousness. All right, I'm going to look ahead real quick, everybody. Everybody remember page 131. 131. No worries. 131. Everybody remember 131. We're looking ahead. Oh my gosh. Okay, I think I found a stopping point. All right, let's find a stopping point. 133. Let me look. 33. Okay, thank you for putting the number in. Yeah, that looks like it. Okay, let's go back up. Well, we have a stopping point. Sorry, everybody. Okay, here we go. The new relations of production always emerge as an objective need for productive forces have developed to such a point that they are no longer compatible with the existing relations of production. In every case throughout history, the new ruling class has gained state power through social revolution. For example, when the capitalist relations of production emerged within feudal class society, capitalists seized state power through social revolution as soon as they were able to gain most power and control over the means of production. The objective need for social revolution caused by unsuitability between productive forces and the relations of production is further discussed in 36. State police and laws in the end only reflect the economic domination of class which owns the means of production of society and primarily serves the need of that ruling class. The ruling class is a class society maintains power over the means of production through state violence. This is the primary function of the state, to enforce stability and establish class relations through coercive force. This dynamic is explained more in 100. Annotation 100. This is vital for understanding the nature of bourgeoisie states as well as the functioning of bourgeois-controlled democracy of capitalist societies. The character of bourgeoisie democracy is described well by Lenin in his articles Democracy and Dictatorship, published in Pravda in 1918. Some speak about pure democracy, the democracy in general for the purpose of deceiving the people and concealing from them the bourgeoisie character of present-day democracy. Let the bourgeoisie continue to keep the entire apparatus of state power in their hands. Let a handful of exploiters continue to use the former bourgeoisie state machine. Elections held in such circumstances are praised by the bourgeoisie for very good reasons, as being free, equal, democratic, and universal. These words are designed to conceal the truth, to conceal the fact that the means of production and political power remain in the hands of the exploiters, and that therefore real freedom and real equality for the exploited, that is, for the vast majority of the population, are out of the question. It is profitable and indispensable for the bourgeoisie to conceal from the people the bourgeoisie character of modern democracy, to picture it as democracy in a general or pure democracy. And the men who are repeating this in practice abandon the standpoint of the proletariat and side with the bourgeoisie. It is sheer mockery of the working and exploited people to speak of pure democracy, of democracy in general, for equality, freedom, universal rights, that when the workers and all working people are ill-fed, ill-clad, ruined, and worn out, not only as a result of capitalist wage slavery, as a consequence of 4 years of predatory war, the capitalist and profiteering remains in possession of the property usurped by them and the ready-made apparatus state power. This is tantamount to the trampling of the basic truths of Marxism, which has taught the workers, you must take advantage of bourgeoisie democracy, which compared with feudalism represents the great historical advances. But not for 1 minute must you forget the bourgeoisie character of this democracy, its historically conditional and limited character. Never share the superstitious belief in the state, and never forget that the state, even in the most democratic republic, is simply a machine for the suppression of one class by another. The dictatorship of the proletariat alone can emancipate humanity from the oppression of capital, from the lies and falsehood and hypocrisy of bourgeoisie democracy for the rich, the established democracy for the poor, only it can make the blessings of democracy really accessible to the workers and poor peasants. Under bourgeoisie system, the blessings of democracy are in fact inaccessible to the vast majority of the working people. It is important to understand that when Lenin speaks of dictatorship of the proletariat, he is not advocating for tyranny over the masses. It must be kept in mind that the proletariat represents the vast majority of human beings on the earth. Building a democracy which exists for, is governed by, in service, the interests of the proletariat. Therefore, it is far less tyrannical and far more egalitarian than bourgeoisie democracy, which serves and is controlled by the ruling class. As Lenin put it, proletarian democracy is a million times more democratic than bourgeoisie democracy. The independence of the superstructure on the base is caused by economic necessity, which embedded within all social activity of legal and political practice to cultural activities of society. Economic necessities are indispensable. Need to maintain and develop the productive forces of society. Economics, in the term of economic necessity, refers to the relationship having to do with production of the material needs of society, as defined by annotation 81, which we're going to get. Necessity here is a synonymous with obviousness, from the universal category pair of obviousness and randomness as used in dialectical materialism. This category pair discussed in more detail. It is in part 1. Obviousness, i.e. necessity, can only apply to material subjects and material world. Obvious outcomes are outcomes which are certain to happen due to objective laws. Obviousness arises from internal aspects, features, and relations of physical objects. Example, paper will burn under certain specific conditions because the internal chemical relations of paper and the objective laws of nature. Economic necessities are obvious, then, in the sense of that they are social activities which must be carried out in order for human society to survive. Economic necessities serve, in this manner, as the most fundamental pressures which drives the development of human societies and serves as a basis of the law of suitability between relationship of production and productive forces. Examples. Throughout history, human beings have had an economic need to secure food in order to continue living. In modern times, electricity is an economic necessity because electricity devices are needed to support human life in its current form. Economic necessities determine aspects of the superstructure of society, and it is in this sense that the superstructure of society is dependent upon the base. Without the function, economic base, and the obligatory processes related to the production of material necessities of human society, no other human social activities could occur. Engels wrote in letter to Nikolai Danielson in 1892, the essence of relationships of the base and superstructure represents the dependency of social consciousness form on the material existence, i.e. social beings of society. And we'll stop there where it says 2, the superstructure impacts the base. On page 331. That was good. More details on how the base and the relationships and like how things form and what the state's function is utilized for. Remember, we seek to get rid of class completely. That's the goal of the dictatorship of the proletariat, to abolish class antagonism altogether. I will tomorrow at 6:30 Central, 7:30 Eastern. So yeah, this is good. This has good pictures. This is a good base. This is a good base to form yourself in Marxism. I think it is, because it does talk about the necessities of a classless, stateless, moneyless society and how to get there. Now, there's different ways of getting there, so it depends on what works for you and what you think is the correct based on the material conditions at hand. It's good to investigate. It's good to criticize. It's good to question everything. Like, for instance, What is the state function within the beginnings of the dictatorship of the proletariat? How does the state become, how is it supposed to wither away? Those are good questions to ask yourself and to investigate. Always challenge your position. Thank you. Yeah, no worries. Yeah. So yeah, I think this is a good starting point for people that are beginning to become Marxists. You know, because it has pictures. It's a textbook. But I would say advance on this base and make your base more solid, if that makes sense. Anyways, does anybody have any questions before I close out? I'll give you guys a second. And we ended on page 133. If I can't answer the questions, I will say I can't answer it. All right. It doesn't look like anybody has any questions. Yeah, no worries. I'm going to, after this, I'm going to go into the Black Radical tradition. I was thinking of reading The Tip of the Spear. A lot of people have been reading that, so I'm going to probably read that. Plus, I wanted to read that because when we're on Two Spirits Live doing what was it? Red Nation podcast, which is a Marxist-Leninist indigenous liberation of Turtle Island and the decolonization effort for the United States and land back as a centerpiece to bring on socialist revolution. So, like, they've said so many times how Tip of the Spear is such a good read, so I'm going to read it. Because in my position, I want to recognize and also understand the Black Radical tradition and their demands of what they want, what type of society they want, and what revolution looks like for them. And also indigenous resistance and their traditions on what they demand and what it looks like for them in a socialist revolution themselves. You know? So it's good to do those things, you know? So, but anyways, no one had any questions. I'll let you all go. I hope you all have a good night.